All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Justin.
I'm Cody.
Roll, yeah, it's me, your old mate Joe again.
And as you might have guessed from that, we are here to give our full impressions of the full series of Moon Knight. A while back, we did our impressions of the first episode, and now that it's all out, and in its entirety, we are ready to talk about the series as a whole.
I think it's the first time we've done this and we revisited a topic, so
I think so. Yeah,
that's true.
So, do we want to do a brief recap of what happened in the first episode, or just jump, say go see episode whatever that was, or
yeah, they can go check out the first one if they want the first one.
Okay. All right. So our story picks up where Moon Knight has just beaten the crap out of a jackal creature, and things get weird. Well, weirder from this point onward. So do we want to talk about kind of overall themes of the show, or do we want to just sort of talk about how the story goes and talk about themes afterwards, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, so maybe we could do just like a brief summary of what happened after that first one that we got together.
I have the summaries pulled up if you want me to just kind of run through it.
Give us like a quick run through.
Sure.
All right, so episode 2.
Heavy spoilers.
Heavy spoilers for the entirety of Moon Knight. So after he beats the crap out of the jackal creature, the museum blames him for the damage that incurred because they have security footage and they cannot see the jackal creature on the security camera. So he gets fired. They try to refer him to a mental health facility of sort. Grant is Stephen meets Layla for the first time, and we learn that Layla is Mark's wife.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. She becomes a major character for the rest of the series.
Yeah, she does.
They're estranged, and she thinks that Mark is kind of trying to push her away, but in reality, he's trying to protect her. Spoiler alert.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else happens here. Another jackal creature gets summoned towards the end of episode 2. And this is where we see Stephen turning into Mr. Knight for the first time.
Yes.
Kind of a version of the Moon Knight costume, except he's got like a 3-piece suit looking pretty fancy.
Very dapper.
And he has these like billy clubs that he fights with. I'm a big fan of Mr. Knight design. I'm just going to say that right now.
Yeah, me too.
Did anyone have any specific thoughts about that episode?
It was interesting seeing them incorporate Mr. Knight without Mr. Knight being his own personality, because in the comics, that persona is kind of its own thing. Whereas in the show, it was just Stephen essentially. But
is he more of a detective, or is that something? I feel like I heard that somewhere.
Kinda. He's sort of the detective is. The most detective-like character is the one we see at the very end of Mr. Knight is sort of more the face. He will interact with people. He'll be more personable than say the standard Moon Knight with the cape and the cowl and all that. He's not quite as much of a powerhouse, but he is still a bit stronger, and he is kind of less violent generally than the standard Moon Knights itself.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just remember that fight in the street was really cool. I mean, just with the us kind of seeing along with Steven, you could see stuff that other people can't see, and there was just like invisible things hitting cars and buses and the walls, and Layla gets in on the fight, and you can't really tell what's going on either. It was just really well done, kind of a one-sided fight until you see what he's seeing,
Yeah, and that's also towards the end of the episode is when we kind of see Moon Knight's powers like in full too. Mark and Stephen are kind of fighting with each other, and Stephen tries to fight the jackal as Mr. Knight, but realizes that he can't quite do the job, so he relinquishes control to Mark, and Mark, there's like a rooftop chase scene.
Yeah, rooftop.
We see Moon Knight has those like moonerangs he pulls off of his chest, which are kind of cool.
He prefers mammarangs.
And then he ends up finally killing the jackal creature, gets impaled. That's kind of how the episode ends. Oh, and then I should say at the end of that episode, Harrow gets the scarab.
Yes.
He actually, I believe, is that when he kills the homeless guy? I think a homeless guy picks the scarab up, and like Harrow like goes up to him and takes it from him and then kills the guy, which I think for me, that's the first time I got the sense that maybe Harrow is not as like righteous as he thinks he is, or at least as he pretends to be, because he doesn't even do the like judgment thing or anything.
Didn't seem to be a fair judgment.
Yeah, he just like straight up kills the guy.
Yeah, unless that guy had done something really, really terrible in the past, or he would have done something really, really terrible in the future, and it was just kind of a, yep, he's got to die.
He wouldn't have even known that though, because he didn't do the thing with the cane. The like
maybe the cane thing is
thing.
Just for looksies.
It could be.
It's magician's sleight of hand.
I took it as Harrow's kind of a dick.
He kind of is at times.
Okay.
But that's how that episode ends, with that Harrow moment.
That's actually Belgian for Harrow. Anyway,
it's true. So episode 3 is the first one that I wanted to talk about a specific scene that I had some issues with.
All right.
Episode 3, we pick up Harrow and his people have found Amit's tomb thanks to the scarab. And Khonshu ends up calling a council with the other avatars of the gods. And the plan is to try to warn them of Harrow's plan and try to put a stop to it. And so they bring Harrow into this chamber, and it's this dude with like glass in his sandals who looks like a weird skeevy hippie type, surrounded by these avatars of the Egyptian gods. And Khonshu basically speaks through Mark/Steven's body, which the way that plays out is super silly. He's just like shouting, like all the avatars are just like acting like people, and then you have like Oscar Isaac shouting, like channeling Khonshu's voice.
You can trust him.
Yeah, it's just
kind of
silly.
a little. Yeah, it's
so he tells the gods that Harrow is trying to find Amit's tomb and release her upon the world, and Harrow's just like, no, man, look at he's crazy, he's disturbed. It's don't listen to him. He's just making this. I'm cool. Don't even bother to investigate his claims. You're gods, you probably have no way of seeing what I'm actually up to. Just look over there. Nothing's going on. It's fine.
I don't see a problem with that. It's
terrible
politics to me.
Oh my God, this scene pissed me off so much.
I didn't have a problem with it.
It's ridiculous. Like, they didn't even stop for a second. Like, honestly, after this scene, I was convinced that the other gods were in league with Harrow for some reason to try to release Amit, because they like dismiss, Mark and Khonshu so out of hand that it's like the only explanation is that they're in on the scheme.
I just took it as Khonshu's reputation with the gods is just so tarnished by this point that they were like, clearly we're not going to trust the crazy god.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think is double reinforced by like him shouting through Mark, because I was like, that's just who Khonshu is. Like, he's clearly the craziest of the gods.
I mean, I could see that, but like, even if they hate Khonshu that much, they can't take like 5 minutes out of their day to go see what Harrow's men are up to, or like, do they have like all-seeing powers? Could they just like take a peek, be like, oh yeah, he is digging over here where Amit is probably buried. Like, you would think if there's even a remote possibility that someone's trying to release this like super dangerous god,
there was a god that could tell that it was Amit, but she was not released yet. So
anyway,
what a twist.
Maybe they were in a rush to get somewhere. Maybe they had a cruise to go on.
Yeah, and actually that kind of brings up in a roundabout sort of way my only my main problem with this scene. It's where everything post Endgame, everything that's come out, every movie and whatnot, whatever group is or entity or whatever is the focus has to have some sort of explanation, for why they didn't bother to step into, during any of the major events that had happened prior to this. And all the avatars of the gods are just kind of like, oh, well, you know that we're not supposed to, we're just observers. We're not supposed to meddle in human affairs. And it's just, at this point in Phase 4 Marvel, that is starting to feel a little bit contrived. Whenever
that's fair, yeah,
that's
like,
fair.
there are literal gods, and it's just like we just don't get involved in human matters.
Yeah, and that also raises the question: did half the gods die when, or get blinked out of existence when Thanos did his snap, or are they exempt from this somehow?
That is a good question. I mean,
it's a good question.
I'm sure their avatars did, but I don't know if the gods themselves would have been affected.
Yeah, it's just something. The more I think about this whole scene, the more questions like that pop up in my head. Oh, this doesn't really seem to tie in much with the other overall Marvel universe, so maybe it doesn't matter.
But
we'll get to that.
That's fair. Oh, I can't believe neither of you guys were as angry about this scene as I was. It's just completely illogical. Like, it just drove me crazy.
But then again, as I mentioned earlier, it feels like real world politics.
That's
someone
fair.
comes up with a legitimate, hey, this is a problem, we need to focus on this, and everyone else is like, we're too busy counting our oil money or whatever. To me, it felt like a reflection of real life in a really kind of depressing sort of way.
That's interesting.
It is an interesting take.
I like it.
So the scene that angered only me plays out. After they basically dismiss Khonshu and Mark's whole thing, one of the other avatars comes up to Mark, and she's like the only one who seems like she kind of believes him, and she points him in the direction of a sarcophagus that has some clues to the location of Amit's tomb.
Yes.
So they go to meet with Anton Mogart, who apparently Layla used to know, who is in possession of the sarcophagus. He's basically just a rich dude who has a little medieval time set up in his yard that he's training and just has this glass...
Too many lubes that both have a sarcophagus under them.
He has this glass pyramid that just has this ancient sarcophagus chilling in it outside, because that's how rich people do apparently. So then Harrow shows up, things get kind of crazy.
The easy part is finding the sarcophagus. The hard part is keeping those windows clean.
It's true. Well, this is where Steven, Mark, first kind of starts to see Steven's value here, though.
Yes.
Because Mark and Layla are looking at the sarcophagus and trying to figure out what the clue is, and we start to see Steven, being reflected hey, Mark, hey, you need my help. And eventually they kind of work together and realize that there is a star map in some of the cloth in the sarcophagus that they can use to try to find Amit's tomb. The only problem is that it's a map of the night sky as it was 2,000 years ago.
No, done. That was a terrible cliffhanger for the series. I really thought they'd go further than that, but next season maybe.
Anyway,
was there more?
There is more.
I'll just make it up. Keep going.
So, the next couple episodes are going to be real fast. So Khonshu shows up and uses his power to turn the night sky back to how it was 2,000 years ago.
Okay, that scene was awesome.
It was pretty great. I have to say, that scene was awesome.
I love that.
Visually, yes. But
here we go.
Okay,
Mr. I counted the revolutions. Here we go.
No. So, Khonshu says, I can do this. I can turn back the night sky and show you
turn back time.
Yeah, show you the constellations as they were then. But the other gods aren't going to like it. They're not going to be happy. So we only have one shot at this. And he does this whole thing where they're rewinding, the sky and the heavens and all that.
Yes. And
Khonshu gets punished for it. He gets sealed away in this little stone figure called an
Ushapti.
Ushapti, yes. And Mark/Steven lose their powers as a result because, Khonshu's sealed away. Okay. There is software that can do this that would not incur the wrath of the gods. My Apple IIgs in the early 90s had a program where you could type in a date and your rough location, and it would give you this little pixelated view of what the sky looked like back then. This is not new.
True. Ask James Cameron. You guys remember when he had to change the night sky in Titanic because of Neil deGrasse Tyson?
I forgot about that, but yeah.
No.
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson made a stink because he watched Titanic and realized that the night sky was not accurate to how it would have been in 1912.
Oh,
so they went back and digitally altered it to make it historically accurate.
Did they, or did they just get Khonshu to turn his hands?
But to Justin's point, I actually thought of that when I saw this scene. I was like, they couldn't have done that any other way.
Right.
Not right then in the middle of the desert, right then when they had to get to the right spot right then.
They could have spared an hour to get back to civilization.
No, they were chasing this dude to the tomb.
I do agree with Cody that it did look really cool. It was appropriately dramatic and it looked cool. And it gave the other gods another reason to be pissed at Khonshu and imprison him in the Ushapti. So it's
that's true.
Mostly for story purposes, I would think.
Yeah, it felt like a really dumb move. I know Khonshu wouldn't have known about that, but one of the humans around could have said, there's an easier way to do this. And I don't know. It's just that it bugs me a little.
Hey, maybe he would have known. What's this Wi-Fi thing you all speak of?
He seems like a Birdman about town.
Yeah, especially at the end, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so episode 4, going to do this one real quick. Steven and Layla find the campsite outside Ahmed's tomb. Looks like people got killed there. Some kind of stuff went down. They go and explore the tomb. Steven realizes that the entire facility is shaped like a giant eye of Horus, which I don't know how he realized that from being inside it, but I'm not going to question it.
Very good sense of direction. It's evidenced by him consistently getting lost in the first couple episodes.
That's fair. Yeah, honestly, we can maybe talk about that later. In the first episode or two, I was convinced that Steven was just a bumbling idiot. And it turns out that he's super smart anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 4, they go and explore the tomb. There's some undead mummy priest dudes who attack.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of tense horror scenes going on there.
Yeah.
They discover Alexander the Great's tomb.
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
Steven, I forget the exact clue that led him there, but realizes that Amit's Ushapti is down Alexander the Great's throat. So there's this, super important historical site that no one has been able to find up to this point, containing one of the most important figures in history. And Steven just breaks his face open, reaches out into his throat. So that's cool. Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm trying to remember, was it Steven or Mark at that point? It was still Steven, right? I think
Steven.
I think it was Steven.
That seems like a Mark move.
Gingerly breaking his jawbone.
But I feel like Steven would at least be more hesitant about it. But.
Oh, he was apologizing during the entire thing. He's like, I'm sorry. Yeah. Or I can't.
I love this whole episode.
So
one of my favorites.
Oh, there's also a moment between Harrow and Layla where Harrow kind of implies that Mark might know what happened to Layla's father and or kind of be involved in that. So that's an important moment.
Yes.
Yeah. She confronts Mark and he tells her that his partner killed her father and Mark before Khonshu saved Mark. Mm-hmm. So Layla's all pissed off. Harrow shows up and has some goons. Mark tries to fight him off, but there's a lot of dudes there. Harrow shoots Mark. He falls into this water. Mm-hmm. And you think it's going to be the end of the episode, but they spend 15 minutes or so, the last part of the episode, Why are you shaking your head, Cody?
I'm building anticipation for
I know
what you're going to say here. I said this episode was amazing.
We cut to what appears to be a psychiatric hospital.
Dun, dun, dun.
And the other residents and staff of this hospital are all people we've seen before. There's is it Crowley, the living statue?
Yes.
We see him. We see Layla is also a patient there. I think the cops that were working for Harrow are like guards or like whatever workers there.
Hee Kwan, Michelle Yeoh.
That was a different.
That was last week. Never mind.
Trippy universe jumping thing.
Sorry, my bad.
Towards the end of this episode, we see so Spectre, Mark Spectre is the one that like wakes up in this hospital. He's kind of like running around. He stumbles upon a sarcophagus that has Steven in it. So Steven gets out, but then there's a second sarcophagus that it looks like there's someone else trapped inside, but we just leave that there for now.
Yeah, we don't worry about that.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
There's nothing to see there. What could that mean? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything.
You have a sarcophagus in the corner that just shakes like someone's trying to get out of it.
I mean, it's just
I'm hoping for Halloween. We'll see.
Just setting the mood a little bit.
Yeah. And
then the episode ends with them running into Hippo Lady,
who simply says, "Hi."
Hi. I have to say, I love the Hippo Lady.
She's fun.
Cody, it sounds like you had some feelings about this episode.
Yeah, I just really I love the ending in the hospital when they wake up there, because I didn't know where it was going to go exactly from there. But dealing with the multiple personalities, I was kind of excited for where it might go. And then just everything in the tomb, honestly, was really like this series had kind of been rumored to go, if not full on horror, at least a little darker tonally, not morality wise, but like actual atmospheric wise than the stuff before it. And I thought this actually pulled it off pretty well with like the mummies jumping out of the dark shadows and nooks and crannies and grabbing at people. And it was pretty good.
It mostly made me want to go back and rewatch the Brendan Fraser The Mummy movie, but
yeah, it felt like that, or Tomb Raider, or even like a hint of Indiana Jones here and there. I mean, it had a nice adventure-y sort of feel to it. This was a very solid episode.
Well, that brings us to episode 5, which was an episode I really loved. We start by also learning really that the Hippo Lady is the Egyptian goddess Tauret, who is there to guide Mark and Steven through the land of the dead. And she explains that the psychiatric hospital that they're in is actually sailing through the Duat, which is the Egyptian afterlife. And she is basically there to, take them through this journey. She removes their hearts and puts them on a scale. And she basically tells them that by the time they get to where they're going, if their hearts have not balanced on the scale, then they're going to be taken by the souls of the damned and stuck in the Duat for all eternity.
That's pleasant.
But if the scales do balance, then they'll be able to go on to the field of reeds, which is basically heaven. So, I mean, basically the course of this episode is when we really kind of get into Mark's backstory. Well, Mark and Steven, really. Mm-hmm. We learned that Mark's mother was abusive. Well, we learned that Mark had a younger brother who tragically died while he and Mark were exploring this cave, and their mother blamed Mark for his death.
Shit getting real dark now.
This episode is pretty heavy. So the mother becomes abusive towards Mark, and Mark, basically Steven forms as an escape mechanism where, Mark is the one who has to take all this abuse and deal with all this violence. Steven is kind of innocent and spared from all of that stuff. And I mean, it's worth mentioning that Steven was born, I forget the name of the movie, but there was a movie that Mark and his brother were super into when they were kids, and Stephen Grant was the name of the main character. It was like Tomb Raider or something similar to that. Tomb Busters, that's it. So that's where the name Stephen Grant comes from, as well as the amazing British accent.
Yes.
But that's really like the bulk of the episode, is exploring Mark's past trauma, and Stephen realizing and kind of accepting that he was created by Mark as, a means of dealing with the not only the loss of his brother, but also his mother's abuse. And then ultimately we learned that his mother has died not too long ago. So just lots of fun trauma and darkness there.
Yep.
Before we get to kind of how the episode ends, how did you guys feel about the whole backstory there?
I'll go before Justin in case he knows the comic version, but I didn't see it necessarily coming. I was watching this one, so I usually watch all the Marvel stuff with my wife and kids, and she didn't get past the first episode, unfortunately, due to scheduling. So I watched the rest of this all with just my kids. And Cameron and I were both like, did he have a brother? Did he not have a brother? Did his brother die? Did he kill his brother? What's going on here? And so it was like, as tragic as we could have possibly have imagined, I would say. And then we weren't sure. I don't know if he like named his second personality after his deceased brother, but that wasn't the case. So, but yeah, it was heavy. It was super heavy.
Yeah, I kind of knew something along this line was coming. I didn't exactly know the take they would do on it for the show, but yeah, Mark had a very regardless of which medium he's presented in, yeah, he's always had a very traumatic past, and seeing it play out on the screen, it definitely felt different than reading it on the page. Just the performances really helped carry that too, and yeah, under other circumstances, I might have felt a little not impatient, but put off by a 6-episode series taking an entire episode to step away from all of the events happening in the present to focus on this. But I felt it was actually pretty well done. Difficult to sit through at times just because of all the guilt and blame and everything going on in his past, but yeah, I think it was very well done, and I didn't mind that it was the entire episode pretty much was devoted to that. Not all the episode, but close to it.
Yeah, most of it. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the performances. I mean, I think this is why you hire Oscar Isaac to be in a Marvel series. Like,
yeah,
I think. I mean, I'm a big Oscar Isaac fan. I think he's a great actor. I think he's good throughout the series, but especially in this episode. I mean, especially playing both roles, like throughout the entire episode, he's like basically playing both Mark and Steven, interacting with each other.
Just got to play off himself. I mean, that's hard. I
heard somewhere that he actually, his Oscar Isaac's actual brother, like stood in during the scenes where, he was acting against himself, basically.
Huh.
So I wonder how much that added to it. But
and then Oscar Isaac was like, "Hey, after this, you want to go explore a cave with me?"
No,
it's supposed to rain later. But no, this was. I said there were two. This was the other episode that I really, really, really liked. Episode 4 and 5. I loved both of them.
So to wrap that episode up really quick, once they kind of make their peace with each other, we learned that their scales still aren't balanced. And that's like going up to this, we kind of were under the impression that, once they each accepted their role, the scales would balance and they'd be able to go on. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And they're out of time and they start. Well, actually, the other thing that happens here is that Tauret says that Amit must have been released because we start seeing just souls falling down from the sky like pretty rapidly. So it looks like people are, getting judged in rapid succession. But they're out of time. Their scales haven't balanced. So these like basically souls of the damned start attacking the boat to try to get to Mark and Steven. They try to fight them off. It kind of seems like there's going to be successful, but then Steven ends up getting dragged overboard. And there's a very dramatic moment of goodbye as Steven gets frozen into like a stone figure.
Mm-hmm.
But after that happens, Mark's scale balances. So I got the impression that at this point, maybe Mark is like reconciling both halves of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the scale balances. And then the episode ends with Mark in the field of reeds, like moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the 5th episode, and then the 6th episode happens.
Tell us how you really feel.
And I will say, well, I don't know if I should. I'll save that for overall commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So episode 6, Amit is free. The other Egyptian gods we see are just killed unceremoniously.
Yeah, or at least their avatars
or
are.
at least their avatars
right,
are. We just see like their avatars are all just strewn about the ground dead.
Mm-hmm.
Layla manages to free Khonshu, and he, as he has been throughout the series, is kind of a dick.
Yep.
I'm just going to put it out there. Khonshu's a giant dick.
But a funny one.
At first, he tries to get Layla to agree to be his new avatar, and she just flat out tells him no. We cut to Mark in the field of reeds, and he kind of realizes what has happened and leaves the basically heaven and goes back to the Duat to try to find Steven, thus completely and immediately undoing the emotional ending of the previous episode. But I won't get into that right now. They managed to escape through the gates of Osiris with Toweret's help. Once again, love the hippo lady. I forget the actress who played her, but I thought she did a great job too. Like the voice work I thought was great.
Yeah.
So they get out and reconnect with Khonshu and become his avatar again. Layla learns that Amit can be bound to a human body if multiple avatars are together to join forces. The problem being, of course, at this point, that there's only one avatar left, and that is Khonshu's avatar in the body of Mark / Steven.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, Ava, where did you live Ava from? Layla becomes Toweret's avatar. We end up seeing her, from my understanding, it's kind of inspired by a comics character called Scarlet Scarab. She's got kind of like the scarab wings, and she has this like pretty awesome, I thought, costume.
Hey, this is literally Joe's background right now, dear listeners, just so we're clear.
I have Layla in her costume.
Behind Joe is Layla as in her costume. So.
Listen, that was the one moment of this episode where I was like,
thought you were gonna be like, that's how my computer came, I swear.
That's just, I don't know. No, like I thought that was awesome. I liked
Layla,
totally. Like I liked Layla through this entire series. I like the actress was great. She's like a total kick-ass character.
Mm-hmm.
Like when she shows up with these wings and she's about to kick some ass, I was like, yes, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the only time I felt that way during this episode.
Gotcha.
Anyway, long story short, she joins forces with the boys and they kick Harrow / Amit's asses. I will say one other thing that was kind of cool, but I don't feel like they really explored its potential. There's the fight scene between the avatars and Harrow going on in the foreground. And then in the background, we see like actual like kaiju style gods fighting. I thought that was kind of a cool concept, even if it wasn't executed as well as it could have been.
Yeah.
But they end up kind of, at one point, it seems like they're pinned down. Like Layla is literally kind of like pinned against this bus with guys shooting at her. Mm-hmm. And Mark is like kind of not doing so well in the fight. And then he blacks out, like the screen cuts to black, and all of a sudden all the henchmen are dead and he's standing there with an axe like in Hero's forehead, but not like fully implanted. And we get a moment of, which has happened a couple times in the series now.
Yeah.
Mark's like, I'm guessing that wasn't you, Steven. Steven says, no, it wasn't me, would it?
Glove blimey.
Oh, blimey. Gov. Anyway, so they both say it wasn't them. We as the audience are kind of like, what's going on? Like, maybe this has happened a couple times, but maybe we don't dwell on it too much. Khonshu tries to get Mark to finish the job and kill. Well, actually, I take that back before we get to that. They have Harrow pinned down. They take him to a chamber and do a ceremony to bind Amit to Harrow's body. And then Khonshu is trying to get Mark to kill Harrow, thus killing Amit, thus ending this whole thing. But Layla kind of tells him, you're free, like you don't have to do what Khonshu says anymore. So he doesn't kill him. And then we cut to the psychiatric hospital again.
Yes.
And there's a scene there where it's Dr. Harrow trying to convince them that they're crazy and whatever. But we get Mark and Steven kind of working together in this construct of mental hospital and realizing that it is fake. And then we cut to both of them waking up in Steven's apartment. And it seems like they've learned to live together. Apparently he's just going to go around talking to himself for the rest of his life. But then we cut to Harrow at a psychiatric hospital of his own.
Time.
Actually, wait, this is the post. Is that the post credit?
This is mid credits. It says.
Okay. So it ends then with like Steven and Mark being buddies and like kind of an optimistic, they're going to be fine together note. And then we get a mid-credit sequence where we see Harrow in a psychiatric hospital, and I forget what the nurse is trying to get him to do something. But then this like figure appears behind him, like behind his wheelchair. It is like, I'll take him. And it's like, we see a pair of like black gloved hands, like take the wheelchair and push it. And we get kind of an ominous feeling. And on the way out, we see a dead body behind a desk. There's like blood on the floor.
That was already there.
It was totally like that. So this figure wheels Harrow out to a limousine and puts him in there, and then just like throws the wheelchair aside.
It's working.
Harrow sits in the limo, and who is in the limo but our old friend Khonshu?
That's right.
And Harrow's kind of like, you can't do anything because Khonshu can't like physically do anything to Harrow without an avatar. But then Khonshu's like, oh, I can't, but this dude can. And we see the divider between the passenger and driver compartments opens up. And it's someone who looks an awful lot like our old friends, Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, except he, I believe, is speaking Spanish. And Khonshu introduces him as Jake Lockley. And he proceeds to shoot Harrow to death. At least we can assume so. We don't actually see it happen.
But
he
it's
points,
a pretty safe bet.
He points a gun at him, and then it cuts away, and there are many bullets fired. So we can assume.
That's how Spanish the series name ends. Of all, Jake Lockley.
Then we see the limo drive away, and the license plate is like SPKTOR or something, Spectre.
Something like that, yeah.
Which was silly. Anyway, what'd you guys think of this finale?
The action scenes I thought were pretty good. The team up between Mark and Layla was cool. I do agree the duality of the fight, the giant gods and then their avatars, fighting kind of in the same shot could have been framed a bit better, but that part all together I thought was pretty cool. I have some issues with the way they introduced Jake Lockley.
Go on.
So it's implied that he was the one who took control during the blackout, where in the middle of that fight, where Mark comes to and he says, "What just happened?" Initially, I thought I didn't expect that to be Jake at all. I figured that was actually Khonshu, because there have been times in the comics where Khonshu just takes direct control, where he just is like, enough of this. You're my avatar. You're doing what I say. I'm just gonna make you do what I say. And I thought that's what had happened there. And I figured that was going to be kind of, if there was any sort of end credit sequence, I thought it was going to be like Mark looking in the mirror and like actual Khonshu looking back at him through his reflection.
Which, I mean, they could have because cool. We did see the scene with all the avatars where Khonshu is speaking through Mark. He's basically possessed him.
Yeah, so I figured that's what
they could have been in line with that. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And then introducing Jake, who really hadn't had a role in the series until that point, at least not a definitive one. I have a feeling anyone not familiar with the comics would have been very confused. I mean, at the best, you could assume, oh, it's another personality that's stuck in Mark and Steven's head. But not knowing anything about him, I have a feeling your general audience is going to be really confused by that. And rightly so, because they didn't develop the character at all. And if there's no season 2, they're probably never going to develop the character at all. So it felt like an odd choice to me.
Our dear friend Dave, who is not with us tonight but wanted to be hosting as well, had a comment on this part that he sent us. He sent us a few comments here, which I'll interject on his behalf. But he said the whole Jake thing was disappointing. Mark and Steven just gloss over their missing time frames without ever questioning them. I know they only had 6 episodes to cram everything in, but hard to believe that they would ignore that.
That's a good point.
Fair. I mean,
as it went on, maybe, but at the beginning, I think they were kind of, at least Steven was pretty genuinely confused what's happening. But
it could be argued that they planted the seeds for this, even in the first episode, like the driving sequence.
Yep.
Like when he blacks out and has shot a guy, or I don't know. I mean, I don't think at that point, because at that point we didn't really know what was going on. But there were at least 1 or 2 other moments throughout the season where it seemed like both Jake and Steven were like, I didn't do that. Did you do that?
Yes.
But I don't feel like it was really enough to,
right,
make us think there was necessarily anything going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've been listening to a lot of season by season or episode by episode, podcast reviews and analyses, and by people who are familiar with the comics.
Mm-hmm.
So I was familiar with the name Jake Lockley because it seemed like everyone was kind of waiting for him to show up.
Yeah.
But by the time it got to the finale and he had not been introduced yet, I didn't think it was going to happen because there was no time for it.
The same.
I figured by the time we got to the finale, it's, maybe that's something they'll do in the future, or they're just leaving it out entirely and leaving it, to be about Steven and Mark. But
let me run an idea past you here I had earlier today. What would your reaction have been as a viewer if maybe Harrow saw the dude in the driver's seat and then they had just did a 10-second montage of 1 second each of all those scenes where he was in, but never explicitly said he was there or even a thing, and then he shot Harrow at the end of that? Would that have worked for you as a viewer? Does that still feel too cheap? Or
it would have helped.
Yeah, I think it would work better.
Yeah, because at least then it would have been a chance to sort of refresh, people's memories, especially if they were watching it 1 episode a week.
Right.
Saying, oh, right, that happened, and was it this guy's? Was he the one doing it all along? That sort of thing. It would have been a chance to touch base and, tie everything together a little better at least.
Okay.
I think this is a problem that most of the Marvel series have had. They have a pacing issue, in general. And specifically, most, if not all of them, have a structural problem where the penultimate episode is super strong, but B, also kind of slows things down in order to develop certain characters and plots. And then when they get to the final episode, it's like warp speed on everything else. And that was the problem with this episode for me, is I really loved episode 5. Like, I really, really loved all the character development. Like, it made me a little emotional, you know, getting deep into like Mark's background and stuff. But then episode 6, like, so much happened so fast. Not only did I have a hard time, like, you know, kind of following everything, but I just didn't care. It was like too much too fast, to the point where like none of it really stuck for me.
I do feel like 6 episodes was too short for this, especially if you're trying to address all the multiple personalities and what they want, what their goals are, how they interact together. I mean, case in point, we don't see Jake until pretty much after the credits, and it's just like, that feels not quite shoehorned in, but it doesn't. It doesn't feel like it was earned. Like, I agree. It was just put in there because they had to, and they didn't have a chance to develop it at all.
I feel like the Jake moment was supposed to be like, what? Like, in an exciting way. But like, literally, as soon as this episode is over, my wife and I turned to each other and said, what the fuck was that? Like, it wasn't like a, you know, like, what exciting thing. It was like, what did I just watch? Like, that was stupid. I hate it.
Oh,
interesting. And there was some ballyhoo too about this finale, because I had seen the headline that the finale broke a record, and I was like, oh, and I clicked on it. Was not, it was
terrible episode.
Well, it was not spoilery. The record was for shortest finale of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. It's like 42 minutes, credits included.
Really?
And I was thinking it was like maybe going to be the other way around. I was like, sweet, like a 70-minute finale. This will be great. But like, again, like we've talked about on several other episodes on here of different things. Like, I don't know why they felt like they needed to have a super short episode to wrap this whole thing up.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, when, you know, Justin, you said like maybe 6 episodes isn't enough. I was going to say, I feel like 6 episodes could have been enough if they would have all been like a full hour long, you know, and I mean, that's theoretically, that's one of the benefits of the streaming platform, is they can make these episodes as long as they want. And I mean, I feel like, and actually that's been a thing with the other Marvel series too. Like, every single Marvel series going into the last episode, I'm expecting it to be like a supersized, like, hour-and-a-half finale. Like, because it always feels like going into the last episode, there's so many things to wrap up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you get there and it's like 45 minutes and it's not enough time to cover everything, but they still try to pack it all in there.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's like an executive decision or what, but yeah, it does feel poorly planned.
I was excited to see the third personality, but I mean, if they had introduced it during the season, like, Oscar Isaac's performance would have been even that much richer if he could have pulled off a whole third personality.
Right.
Like, even if it was the smallest one of the 3, or even had, you know, even if they had done like a shot of Mark talking into the mirror to Steven, like, was that you? No. Was that you? No. You know, something where like the viewer's a little more like, okay, there's definitely something else going on here.
Yeah, or even like another reflection that didn't sync up with either Mark or Steven.
Ooh, that'd have been cool.
Yeah, that would have been cool. I honestly, like,
write the show, Justin.
You probably would have done a better job.
Oh,
thank you.
I honestly, like, I wish they would have just left it out. And I mean, I it's probably not even the showrunner's fault. Like, it's just, it's indicative of just the way all of these like Marvel things work now, is that you expect there's always going to be some kind of stinger to set up the next thing. And like, in this case, like, this show really doesn't tie into the greater MCU at all. So like, they had to set something up, so they throw this in there to be like, oh, but there's this thing. And like, I feel like in this case, I would have been happier like just not having that scene at all.
Same.
Like, just let it end and let it have been about Mark and Steven, and, you know, ultimately they learn to coexist, and hey, that's nice.
Yeah,
because I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but I would rather they had integrated it earlier in the season.
Definitely.
Yeah,
like, I mean, no matter which way you slice it, it was the wrong amount.
Yeah, I mean, if they had to put Jake in there, like, yeah, they absolutely should have introduced it earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there are ways that they could have done it subtly, or at least like built up to it. Like, but I feel like by the time in episode 4 that we see that other sarcophagus, like they should have introduced Jake by that point or at that point.
Yeah.
And like still given us a couple episodes with that character to at least get some idea of what he's about.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because I could ask you guys, what do you think? Who do you think Jake is right now? And I guarantee, or I can pretty much guarantee you would either be off the mark or have no idea.
No, Mark's the other guy.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I've heard some things from the other podcasts and stuff, but like from what I've gathered, it sounds like, from my understanding in the comics, he's like literally a New York cabbie.
Yes,
and
with
I mean,
ties to like the criminal underworld.
Yeah, like I wouldn't make that jump here based on the portrayal here, but like, I mean, based on what I see in the series, all I know is that he's like a stone cold killer. I mean, I'm assuming he's responsible for all the times that we have seen people just straight up murdered in the wake of Moon Knight.
Yeah, I think that is what they're going for here. In the comics, again, it depends on which run you're reading, but he can be brutal sometimes, but he can also be kind of just a boots to the ground sort of detective type character, where he has all these connections with criminal outfits and whatnot, and he uses those to try and get information. So there's that element to him too, but you'd never know it from how the series presented him.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my problem too, is that because all we really see here is the violence, like, especially once they like finally, formally introduce him at the end, it really rubbed me the wrong way, because there has really been nothing to make me feel like Mark has that in him. Like, we know that he was a mercenary, but I would not think that any part of his personality would be this like just ruthless murderer.
Yeah.
So without having any other nuance of Jake's character introduced, it just felt really kind of wrong to me.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, I think I agree that either he needed to be introduced in a more rounded sort of way, or just not do it at all, save him for season 2 without this little stinger at the end. Because honestly, the way they did it, it felt like one of those old cheesy horror movies where it's like, the monster's dead and credits are about to roll and says the end ? That's what it felt like with the way they did it, and that's not a good feel for the end of an otherwise pretty good show, I think.
Yeah.
Can we talk about some other topics here?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Let's go to. I just wanted to run down how you all think some of these actors and actresses did in their roles here, starting with Oscar Isaac. Consensus being pretty good.
Spice Daddy.
Yeah, he did great.
I would agree. We have a comment here from Dave as well on this one. He said Oscar Isaac was fantastic. Shifts between Mark and Steven were well done. It was fun to be able to tell which was which with just a simple body language cues. I hope he can come back and play Moon Knight again at some point. Yeah, and I'd agree with you guys. I thought he did a fantastic job. Joe said he was good in everything he was in, which I would almost agree. I think he was in episode 8, though, so not everything, but almost
We'll
everything.
Get there, Cody.
Okay.
We'll get there. For the listeners at home, I believe Cody is referring to Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Yes, Star Wars: We went from 7 to 9 and never did an 8. Layla the Scarlet Scarab. This is May Kalamaway. Is that right?
Kalamaway? Sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the pronunciation.
Joe, you mentioned you really liked her.
Yeah, I liked her a lot. She's actually an Egyptian actress playing an Egyptian character in a series set in Egypt, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
I thought she did a good job of, especially like in the fight scenes and stuff. I thought she handled the action well.
Yeah.
One moment that I just remembered, which was kind of silly, but was when she first appears as Scarlet Scarab. Well, I guess they haven't named her in the series, but the little girl walks up and in, I think, Arabic says, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" Instead of just, like, "Are you a superhero?" Or anyway, I don't know.
I can understand the question. It's just like, holy crap, there's superheroes in my country too, that sort of thing.
I mean, I like what they're going for. I just thought the phrasing of "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" just felt kind of weird. Anyway, but I think May Callaway, I'm forgetting her name.
Well, she'll be famous now.
May Callaway.
May Callaway.
I think she's great, and I really hope that even if Oscar Isaac doesn't come back, because it sounds like he's cast a little doubt over that, like, I hope we at least see her in the future.
I really enjoyed her also. The costume was I was really a little, I wouldn't say worried, but at the beginning I didn't know that Layla was going to have as big of a role as she ended up having. I was worried originally she was there maybe for like emotional ties for Mark and Steven, but she kind of fleshed out and became pretty damn important by the end.
Yeah, her character growth and progression was handled pretty well. I mean, I initially was a tiny bit worried that they were just gonna have her in there as like a little nod to Mark's past, and then they might cross paths and then they'd kind of go their separate ways, or worse, she'd end up as like a damsel in distress or something. And I'm glad that didn't happen, because they did a lot with her, and she really added to the show, I thought.
Our invisible friend Dave said it was nice to see Layla stick to her convictions. Even when things looked bleak, she didn't give in to Khonshu and his offers of power.
Yeah, I like that too. I like that she basically literally told Khonshu to F off.
Yeah. He's like, but the world is ending. She's like, yeah. Khonshu, what did we feel about Khonshu? So this was just voiced by, I'm assuming, F. Murray Abraham. I don't think he did any.
I doubt he did the mocap.
No.
I love F. Murray Abraham as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had mixed feelings about him as Khonshu. I mean, I mentioned when we reviewed the first episode, I had issues with how informal he felt. Which, I mean, in retrospect, it kind of makes sense if he was like an outcast of the Egyptian gods, and it seems like he has spent a lot of time trying to like lure mortals into like working for him and stuff. So maybe he's, a little more down with modern verbiage and stuff. But I don't know if my issues are like F. Murray Abraham's fault or if it's just the character. Like I said, Khonshu's a dick. Mm-hmm. So I guess, I believed he was a dick, so maybe it worked. I don't know. I was not like, I guess I don't have super strong feelings one way or the other.
So were the other avatars out and about also, or were they mostly confined to the temple? Like, we didn't really get a good sense of that, I don't feel like.
Well, I mean, they were dressed up in like business wear and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
I would assume that they were also out and about because it seemed like they were not interacting with mortals as much.
Okay.
But they're more observers than participants.
Yeah. With regards to Khonshu, I will say maybe not so much in his verbiage, but in terms of his personality, he was pretty faithful to the comics. Khonshu is a dick.
Okay.
He doesn't care about people's feelings or desires or anything like that. He just wants what he wants, pretty much. And if that means ruining Mark's life, Steven's life, other people's lives, that's fine. He's a god. He doesn't care. And like I said, I'm not so sure about the lines he was given in this at times, but overall, the character was, if you'll pardon the pun, spiritually in line with the character from the comics. So I liked that.
That's fair. Yeah, I thought I liked him overall. I mean, I made some notes here. Like at different points, he was serious. He was funny, demanding, even a little tragic. Maybe when he gets sealed away towards the end, I thought he had a really good look to him too. Remember those first few episodes? Like genuinely, I was like, this thing's spooky, man. And then later on, I'm like, this guy's just an asshole. But that's that happens in a couple different things.
What did Dave say about Khonshu?
He didn't have any comments on that one.
I prefer Khonshu.
And then Amit, what did you think of Amit? Dave had a comment here, said Amma was a good villain. Actually agreed with her philosophy. Ooh, we should get to that later on, but we'll come back to that.
Wait, Dave believes in precognition.
Hold on. Hold on. I don't have any things on visually. She's pretty cool looking, but it really is just for that Godzilla fight, right? That's
I mean, there's really not much to Ahmed as a character.
Yeah.
And then is it Towerette?
Yeah.
Towerette, yeah.
You love the hippo lady?
I love the hippo lady. I thought she was delightful.
She was.
Yeah, she was enthusiastic. She liked her job. She was excited to, be escorting people to their final fates, whatever they might be. She, actually seemed like she cared about her passengers. It was, she was
fun. Great.
What
age? How she was all like, I haven't done this in 1,000 years.
That's just gonna say, what age is she if she's a human? She gotta be like 85 or something. Hello, dearie. Would you like some tea before your soul's are damned forever? I did have a question here. Back to the premiere episode, I was thinking about Justin, maybe, but Joe as well. Remember in that first episode we talked about in the museum, they had the poster that they put up or the tapestry.
Yeah.
And it had the gods and it said there was
there
question mark. 2 or 3 missing. Were there supposed to be 8 or 9?
There's supposed to be 9.
And there was only 5 avatars listed plus 3 more. So we're missing 1 still.
Yeah, I felt like they never really addressed that whole thing.
You're right. I actually almost forgot about it because it's been so long since I watched the first episode.
There's Horus, Hathor, Osiris, Isis, and Tefnut, plus the 3 that choose an avatar.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
So there is a mystery 9th one that is missing.
Gotcha.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I mean, hopefully if there is a season 2, they touch on that. But yeah, they just kind of abandoned that little plot element for this entire, 6-episode run after that point.
I didn't know. I remembered you saying something like, I have a theory on who some of the ones missing may be, and maybe it turned out to be those ones, maybe it did not. I don't know, but
yeah, because I knew Khonshu was going to be one of them, just because Khonshu is such a central figure in the Moon Knight story, and the others they could have been a variety, but I hadn't realized that we were still missing one. And you're right.
I mean, was Khonshu, I forget what the name was for the group of the 9 gods.
Our first episode.
Do we know, was Khonshu a member of that group?
Also a good question.
Yeah,
I'm not 100% sure. I feel it was implied, and I thought they were going to kind of work it in a bit when Khonshu, was first revealed, but yeah. I thought Hero was a great villain. Like we said in our discussion of the first episode, he had a lot of conviction. He believed in what he was doing, whether what he was doing was right or not. Dave apparently has some thoughts on that. But yeah, he really felt like someone who thought he was doing the right thing. For most of it, there was that incident we talked about earlier with the homeless guy and all that, but for the most part, he felt like a convincing villain because he didn't see himself as a villain. And I thought he pulled that off pretty well, and he made a good foil for Mark / Steven / Moon Knight.
I liked Hero for the most part. I mean, there was 1 or 2 tiny little instances where I felt like he broke his own code, like when he killed the homeless guy, maybe a little bit when he lied to the gods, just a little bit like more manipulative than he normally would be, but
what did you think about Ethan Hawke's portrayal of Hero?
Let me tell you what our friend Dave said about it.
Oh boy.
Arthur Harrow never really developed a personality. The first scene with the glass demonstrated well that he was devoted to his cause, but that ended up being the only aspect to his character. His history with Khonshu could have been much more compelling. I feel like Ethan Hawke slept through the performance.
Oof. Wow. I actually thought he was really good.
Yeah.
I thought he was appropriately creepy. I mean, going back to the first episode, there's the scene in the village in the Alps or wherever where he's kind of got a little cult going on and he's promising them heaven on earth. And I mean, I thought he was, appropriately charismatic in that scene.
Yeah.
I thought he did a great job as the villain here.
Yeah, like when someone was judged to be unworthy, he seemed genuinely sorrowful that they had to die because he wanted them to go on to see the world that he was putting together. And I thought he had range and depth, and I kind of wish Dave were here so we could actually pick his brain a bit more about his comments on that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly I felt like the performance was restrained, but I felt like that was on purpose. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like he was trying to have sort of like a monk-like, Zen calm to him.
Yeah. Yes.
I thought that was a choice rather than like a lack of range on his part.
Yeah, same. Where he was kind of being portrayed as this like mystic, prophet, holy man kind of thing, and in a lot of fiction, that's kind of how they are. They're a bit removed from the world in terms of that sort of thing. So I thought that came across well.
You're wrong, Dave.
Yeah. Standout scenes I just had. We already mentioned all these. I like my ones I wrote down here were Moving the Night Sky, everything that took place in the tomb, everything in the hospital, with including the ship in the sand, and then the final fight with Harrow versus Moon Knight, Mr. Knight, and the Scarlet Scarab. My picks. I like those.
Those are solid. I guess there's also kind of the cupcake truck sequence.
Yeah, I love that
first
scene.
Episode.
I was about to say.
Yeah, that was interestingly done and really kind of set up the whole. Okay, Stephen doesn't know what's going on, and yet he's just clearly doing things during the points where he doesn't know what's going on, and it really kind of was a nice introduction to the multiple personality thing before the other personalities really were front and center. So plus it was just a fun sequence. Horrible CGI boulders aside.
I agree. There's also the like creepy Khonshu hallway old lady scene.
Yeah, they never came back to that.
Which they never came back to, but that felt pretty horror-y. Like that was genuinely spooky.
I forgot about that scene. Yeah, what the heck? So he was that makes me question that scene even more now.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, I mostly agree with the ones you listed there, Cody.
Okay. Let's see here. Just a couple other areas I had. Some plot choices here, which I read this on a website earlier today, so I'm not claiming credit for this one, but they said not a lot of TV shows start with the finale episode with your protagonist dead. I just thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I would be here. Like, I'm sure it's been done. I would be curious.
Yeah, it was. Probably not, but the part with the psychiatric hospital went on so long and had so many layers to it, like of him trying to escape his own mind. There was like at least a split second watching episode 4 into 5 where I was like, could he just be really crazy? Like, is he actually just in an insane asylum?
There are runs of the comic that the entirety of the runs are like that. And heading into the series, into the show, I was worried that was the direction they were going to take for most of it, because there's only so much of him running around in his own head you can take before it starts to feel like, okay, is he actually accomplishing anything, or am I just wasting my time here? I feel that wasn't as egregious in the show because it moved at a better clip, and it was handled well. It was well shot, well staged, all that. Also, I wasn't paying $4 an issue to watch him just try to escape from technical creatures that are probably just like orderlies at a hospital. So.
I honestly, I thought the hospital stuff was done pretty well. I never for a second questioned, whether that was actually the reality or not. And that is mainly due to the set design. Like particularly Dr. Harrow's office. Like there's not a medical facility on Earth that looks like that. It looks like a modern hipster loft or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's visually cool, but I did not for a single second believe that was an actual medical facility.
That's fair.
That's another thing we should point out though, is in those sequences, that's another Ethan Hawke performance, and those were well done as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As the psychiatrist or psychologist, I always get the terms mixed up. But he was a completely different person and sold that pretty well too, because he had that sort of professional condescension that you get from a lot of those types of characters, and
barely smug. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, he portrayed that really well, I thought, in those scenes.
I'm not a mental health professional, but I will say that the whole sense versus nonsense thing pissed me off. I don't think that's something that a mental health professional would actually tell someone, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Anyway,
that's fair.
Yeah. What else you got, Cody?
Let's see here. I have, so just overall the like tone or the theme. I guess we could pull Dave's comment back up for this part here. So I just put some notes here. I said it definitely was darker. It was grittier than most of the Marvel stuff. Dealt with things like death, guilt, dissociative identity disorder, regret, some violence, some horror elements in here. But kind of maybe that central question was kind of what Dave's getting at here, which was the Amit, precognition we referred to it as, I guess, here. So he said, I actually agree with her philosophy versus Khonshu. If you can know the balance of a person's skills beforehand, it's on the evil side. Bleeping take them out. Well, he said fucking. It's harsh, but would make for a better world, wouldn't it? ? So he's team Amit.
So he's
Joe, you did
maybe Hitler.
Joe, you did not sound like you were team Amit.
I'm not.
So you're team Khonshu.
I don't think I need to be team either. I mean, if I had to, I guess I would be team Khonshu, because I think that team Amit is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like no matter how logically you try to look at that perspective, there are going to be flaws there. I also feel like people can change, and I don't believe in predestiny. So
all right, Justin, he fell for it. The 60-minute personality test. He just chose himself to be Katy Perry, not Taylor Swift. I knew we could get you on it. I knew it.
But yeah, going off of what Joe said, I also don't believe in fate. So the idea that, you can look at, take the old lady from episode 1, where she goes up, she's excited to be judged and everything, and he basically says, I'm sorry, you're a bad person. She's like, but I've lived a good life. And he's like, maybe it's something that hasn't happened yet. She was like 65 years old. I mean, the odds of her, just doing something that horrible to be deemed a bad person, bad enough to just be, cast into the duat forever. It just, I don't know, that doesn't sit well with me. I think that people are products of their environments, their experiences, and that and their own personalities, and they can adapt and adjust and change based on what happens to them, what their thought, what their experiences have been. And I don't think that saying that, oh, you can just point to somebody and say, well, they're objectively going to be a terrible person in the future. I don't think you can do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, is like, whose moral barometer are we using to judge these things?
That's an interesting point.
Is the ancient Egyptian god who thinks that we should murder millions of people for something they might do in the future, like the best judge of character?
Probably not.
I like I said, I think there's always a flaw, in that kind of system.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really tough one. Like, if you had the real ability to eliminate some terrible thing from happening later,
kill baby Hitler. I mean, that's kind of the question.
I mean, it kind of is. I don't know where I would be on this one. This is a tough one. I would probably lean more towards Khonshu, but I'd be somewhere near the fence in view, I think, on this. This is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it gets complicated because you have, like, what are the criteria?
Mm-hmm. And can you ever be that secure in your assumption that
that's more the angle I was thinking it from? Like, just because something is going to happen doesn't mean something couldn't change it still somehow, I guess. Right. I don't know. Like, you have to hold out hope, but then you don't want to wait until he's like, I told you I'd launched the nuke, and you're like, oh, I was wrong.
Has Dave seen Minority Report? I'm just saying.
I would guess, but I don't know. Tough call. He had another comment here on tone, which was humor. He said, very little humor as the episodes went on. I don't need a quipathon like some Marvel shows and movies have, but a little more would have been better. How did humor work for you in this?
I felt the places where it was used, it was generally used fairly well. It didn't overstay its welcome. It wasn't, slapsticky for the most part, and it didn't feel like like Dave said, like they constantly needed to have every character throw in a witty one-liner, every chance they got. It had a chance to breathe and develop it, its own personality, its own tone, and I think that tone was a bit stronger for not having constant jokes in amidst everything.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it definitely was not humorless. Like it definitely, I felt like it had just the right amount of levity. I mean, by and large, it is dealing with pretty dark, heavy subject matter.
Yep.
So I feel like the overall tone was appropriate for that. I mean, there are definitely moments of humor, and I mean, like Justin said, I felt like the humor that's there did the job without really being like over the top, or a lot of Marvel stuff can be a little bit too wacky and slapsticky, and I felt like this balanced it really well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd probably agree. Like you said, Joe, the penultimate episode probably is like the emotional heart of this one, and like from
and it was a laugh riot.
One up to 5, kind of like the humor tapered off. I felt like every progressive episode, and then by the time they got to 6, well, the other thing that's kind of is a little different than most Marvel shows, and it doesn't really have like the jokey side character either. Like who's the closest? The hippo lady, and she doesn't really joke. She just talks in a funny voice. I mean,
I feel like Steven, at least at times, is kind of the jokey side character.
Yeah, I guess he himself is.
That kind of tapers off as it goes. I mean, like I said, in the first episode or two, I thought Steven was like supposed to be just like a bumbling idiot, and then we kind of learned that he is actually really intelligent and studied in Egyptian history and all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
All right, then we're getting to the end of my list here. The next thing I had was MCU connections.
Nope.
Which is always hot debate over every time a new property comes out from Marvel. So Dave's comment here was no crossovers whatsoever. Again, I think he mentioned this when we talked about the first episode, right? Yeah. He said, I don't want to be hit over the head with cameos, needless fan service. Give me something to make it feel like it's part of the larger story, please.
Could not care less.
I wrote over. Yeah, I think it worked well for it being standalone.
Yeah, I think I liked it better for being standalone because I didn't feel obligated to watch 3 movies and another show to know what was going on or to fully appreciate what was going on.
So I agree. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm disagreeing with Justin.
Oh,
that's why I was confused. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and honestly, that's been my biggest problem with American comics for years now. The fact that everything has to tie into the some whatever the next big event is. A series can be going along telling its own story just fine, then all of a sudden, oh, the Skrulls have invaded again or whatever, and then it has to stop what it's doing and take part because it's the next biggest world-changing event that's going to leave the Marvel universe different for all time until we reboot it again 6 months later.
Yeah, that's fair.
And go on.
No, go on, Justin.
Oh, and letting something tell its own story, it's almost a lost art in American comics these days. So that's why I really appreciated what Moon Knight did here, because it didn't feel like it had to, go through a checklist and make sure that it nodded to all the other things going on. It could just be its own thing.
I agree. I mean, Justin raised a good point, which is that clearly Crowley the Living Statue is a secret Skrull. There's your connection right there. Boom.
I'm super sad I didn't actually see him in the psychiatric ward. I'll have to rewatch that.
No, I agree wholeheartedly with Justin, though. I mean, I've enjoyed most of the Marvel things, but I've mentioned in our first episode about Moon Knight that I have started getting some Marvel fatigue. And it is just a lot to try to keep up with. Everything is connected in so many different ways. Yeah. And I was excited by the prospect of having this series that is just telling a story, and I hoped it would tell it a little bit better than it ultimately did, but I did appreciate the fact that it didn't feel beholden to the larger MCU and was trying to just do its own thing.
Yeah.
So apparently there was the I forget the showrunner, director. I don't know who actually this quote was from, but apparently there was going to be a connection. I was reading that they wanted, it was actually for what it would have been kind of cool. They were going to do 3 or 4 of the Eternals as a cameo, but set it like way back in ancient Egypt, like they had just interacted with Khonshu's avatar back then during some fight, and then that would have been like the connection to the MCU.
Huh.
Which I like that it would have been way back then, because that would have been kind of interesting. But
yeah,
so that was canceled.
I almost thought that the little girl who asked, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" I almost thought there was going to be a tie-in to the upcoming Miss Marvel show, but I'm like, that's not the same actress. And yeah, I was just, but for a brief moment, I'm like, okay, is that are they actually tying this in at all? And yeah, probably not.
I mean, speaking of tie-ins, I don't know if we could speculate a little bit.
Sure.
I wish we knew for sure whether or not all those gods were dead or if it was just their avatars, but I believe there's a forthcoming Marvel movie that will deal with pantheons of various sorts and possibly members of those pantheons ceasing to exist. So I'm wondering if there could possibly be a connection there.
Possibly.
Might be.
Yeah.
It could be. It's Thor: Love and Thunder. the villain of that movie is called Gore the God Butcher. So do the math.
Do the math.
But I mean, it does seem like, I mean, it's possible that they're, introducing more gods in the MCU to kind of tie into that.
Yeah, I mean, that movie's going to have some other ones in it also. The only real connection here to the MCU was the hippo lady. What's her name again? Toweret mentioned the ancestral plane from Black Panther, but that was really that was the only real connection. And I just had a note here, like, as more of these TV shows come up, one thing I was thinking about is the fatigue, Joe, you're talking about, but it also kind of made me wonder, like, if it's a new character being introduced, so say like not Loki, but Moon Knight, for example, or She-Hulk coming up or whatever, like, are they going to have these characters make the jump to the movies, or is there going to eventually make 2, concurrent universes, which would be ironic because for the longest time they were like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Netflix shows were like over here.
Well, yeah, that was going to be kind of the plan with the Netflix shows, was they're going to have their own little thing, and then they came together in the Defenders, and there was talk about possibly having the Defenders jump up to the MCU in some capacity.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Just made me wonder, like, would Moon Knight ever show up in a movie, or is this just purely like a character that's going to exist for this TV show or a second season if they do that? Or
I would not at all be surprised if we see him in a movie. Like, I mean, Oscar Isaac is a film actor. Like, it's shocking that he's doing a TV series at this point.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is true of, all of these MCU series. Like, I mean, possibly, spoiler alert, from my understanding, WandaVision definitely ties into the new Doctor Strange movie that just came out. I mean, we're pretty sure that Hawkeye is setting up things that will be in future movies. I mean, Loki has been in movies.
Yeah.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier is definitely setting up things that are going to be in the future movies. So I think I would assume that we will probably, assuming Oscar Isaac is not, hesitant about coming back, I would assume that we'll probably see Moon Knight on the big screen at some point.
I mean, I guess that is true, but this is also the first one that had no characters from the MCU in the TV show.
True.
That is also true.
So I don't know. I mean, it could be.
I don't know. My gut instinct is you don't hire Oscar Isaac to only be in a TV series.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. That's my exhaustive list, other than a couple of hard-hitting ranking questions here down at the end for you, gents. Okay. Starting with ranking the TV show from 1 to 10.
Rating this TV show from 1 to 10?
This TV show, our usual 1 to 10 TV show. And I will even go first. How's that?
Sure. Go for it.
I liked a lot about this show, especially the dark elements, the horror style stuff, the tomb episode, the hospital, the dual personality I thought was pretty cool. I loved Scarlet Scarab at the end, and Hera was pretty good too. It's not entirely without flaws, I would say, as it went through. We mentioned a lot of those in this podcast. I'm going to go with, I'm between two numbers here. I'm going to give this a 8.
Wow.
Okay. Parentheses 7.5. Who would like to go next?
I guess I can go next. So I had a lot of expectations and some trepidation going into this, since I know a fair amount about the character in the comics. I wasn't sure what sort of tone they were going to take, which personalities they were going to bring in, how they were going to handle them. There were all these questions in my head, especially like, how is this going to look in the eyes of your general audience who doesn't know the character from anything other than just like the concept art leading up to it. As a fan of Moon Knight, the character before this, I think, aside from how they handled Jake Lockley, that it was a pretty good presentation of Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, Khonshu, all the various elements. I thought it told a cohesive story, credible threats, good acting, a lot of interesting tonal shifts from, as Cody said, horror to like full-fledged adventure to occasional bits of comedy. It did a lot of things in 6 short episodes. And while I do feel it could have used another episode or two, or as Joe said, to have had the episodes more of a more uniform length, all things considered, I never really expected to see Moon Knight on the screen at all. And I'm happy with the presentation they gave him. Not perfect by any means, but I honestly really enjoyed this. I am also going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Wow.
Joe Janka.
Ooh, I feel like the pressure's on. I think I gave the first episode the highest rating out of anyone on that podcast episode. Pretty sure I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
I loved that first episode. I thought it was super strong. It definitely got me intrigued to see where things were going to go. Unfortunately, I feel like most of the rest of the series was just really uneven. I mean, there were a lot of things that I really enjoyed. I liked all the performances, but I don't feel like the material always lived up to those performances. I think the writing was a little iffy at times. I really, really did not like the last episode. I just thought it was super disappointing, especially coming off such a strong episode 5. Like I said, I think that is just kind of an ongoing problem with these Marvel series, is that they'll have these penultimate episodes that are just really strong and really like dig into these emotional things, and there's almost no way that the finale can live up to that, and it like almost pretty much never does. And this series definitely had that issue for me. By and large, like, the weird thing for me about this show is that the only thing I really cared about was the relationship between Mark and Steven. Like, I loved those characters and I was really invested in them kind of like figuring their stuff out, to the detriment of the action and the superhero stuff, which is weird to say about a Marvel series. Like, I almost feel like I would have been okay just not really having any fight scenes in this series, because I was just so into the like exploration of their, mental health and stuff. Anyway, all that is to say, there's a lot that I liked about the series. Coming into this podcast, I actually was expecting to give this an even lower score, but kind of thinking about it and talking about it with you guys, I'm adding a number, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Like, honestly, coming into this, I was expecting to give it a 6, but I think there's more that I appreciated about it that I had kind of realized before that. But I think this might be the first time that I'm the low number on the score meter.
Remind our dear listeners that he said the only thing he cares about was the relationship between Stephen and Mark, yet his background is still the Scarlet Scarab. Let's continue on, dear listeners.
I mean, I love the Scarlet Scarab, but
Now,
I'm saying as far as...
Here's a fun game for us to play.
Yeah.
Dave also gave it a score out of 10.
Oh.
Gentlemen, care to take a guess?
I'm going to say Dave matched me at 7.
No, I think that's too generous. I have a feeling he lowballed this. I'm going to say he gave it a 6.
3.5.
Wow. Ouch.
So this really went down the tank for him, I guess, after that first episode. Wowza. That's our lowest rated thing we've had pop up so far, I think.
Got a 6.625 average.
Till we so if we take his out, that's pretty close to what I'm seeing with all the websites, I would say, out there.
Wow.
We're in the high 7s, up to 8, between 7 and 8. All right, and then I had challenged the gentleman here to do one bonus ranking tonight. Now that we've had 5 live action Marvel series, putting them in order of their favorite to their least favorite, or if they'd prefer to give them the opposite way around. And I'll do Dave's first since he participated in this as well. His so he also ranked What If. I didn't put that on my list, but it's probably gonna be at the bottom. So his is worst to best: Falcon and Winter Soldier, Moon Knight. So Falcon and Winter Soldier is apparently below 3.5. What If, Hawkeye, WandaVision, and Loki is his favorite so far. And I can do mine as well.
Sure.
I have What If's going to be my bottom one because I just did not feel like that show explored the potential at all of what it could have done. Falcon and Winter Soldier. Here's a hot take. Loki is my 4 show.
What?
WandaVision for 3, Moon Knight at 2, and Hawkeye is my favorite.
Wow.
Well, I've only seen 2 of these shows in their entirety, so I'm not sure if you really want me to weigh in on this, because I haven't seen any of Hawkeye, so that's just like a Schrodinger's cat. It might be great, it might be complete garbage. I don't know.
Let me ask you this question before you rank them.
I mean, it stars Jeremy Renner, so it can't be that great.
It also has a one-eyed dog, though. He's so cute. Did you see Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Not all of it.
Did you see What If?
I have not.
All right, so just pad your list and put those at the bottom. Keep going.
Well, from what I saw of Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's a reason I stopped out of after 1 episode. So it felt very heavy-handed, and in terms of its messaging, it was trying to get across, and it just didn't feel like there was any subtlety or skill to the storytelling based on that first episode. So that is at the bottom. I'm going to put, I guess, Hawkeye 1 above that because I have no idea. It might be terrible. It might be good.
Jeremy Renner.
Middle of the pack, I would have WandaVision, one I did see all the way through. I liked what I saw of Loki. I hadn't finished it. I don't even remember why, but I guess I would put that 1 step above WandaVision because I liked the world they were building up there a lot better. And at the top, Moon Knight. And I might be biased because, like I said, I liked him from the comics.
I do have to say the Loki finale was pretty damn awesome, but I didn't really care for Tom Hiddleston or lady's name I can't think of at the moment. Joe
names, but yeah.
All right, number 5
Sophie
is Jeremy Renner.
Just himself.
Number 4, no. Number 5 is Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It was terrible. We were talking before we started recording about the fact that there's 1 memorable scene in that entire series, which may have been the most shocking and dark scene in all of Marvel.
Yep.
Which I won't spoil here. So I mean, it's noteworthy for that, but otherwise it's just, there's nothing to it. It's
the side characters in that one are oddly more intriguing than the main 2 leads, which is weird.
Yeah, that's fair, but it's just pretty meh overall. Number 4, but a giant gap between it's Falcon and the Winter Soldier is in the freaking dumpster, in the toilet somewhere. And then high above that at number 4, I would put Moon Knight. I mean, I like I said, there's a lot that I enjoyed about Moon Knight. I don't feel like it really came together into as great a cohesive whole as it could have been, but at least there was, good in it. Number 3, I would have to give to WandaVision. Actually, similarly to Moon Knight, I really liked it. I enjoyed a lot of it, but I thought it was pretty uneven.
I thought you were gonna say up till the end, and I was like, yeah, it kind of was the same.
Well, and that too. And again, it kind of suffers from the same thing where like it's super strong going into the finale, and then it just kind of falls apart under the weight of like all of the things it has set up.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I mean, if nothing else, it made me care about 2 characters that I absolutely gave no shits about beforehand. And I mean, I think a lot of people would say the same thing.
Timmy and Tommy.
Exactly.
No, wait, those are the Animal Crossing people.
the Nooks.
It's something close to that, though.
Number 2, I would have to give to Hawkeye. I have to say, it's the first thing I've seen Jeremy Renner in that I thought he was actually okay in.
That show's delightful. I love it.
And it's delightful. I had a great time watching that show. Like,
it's a New York Christmas murder mystery, and I love it.
I was shocked because I have a long-standing hatred for Jeremy Renner. I generally think he's a terrible actor. Gave 0 shits about the character of Hawkeye. And somehow that show made me care about Clint Barton, and it was just a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah.
It was a Christmas miracle.
It was.
And it has a one-eyed dog who likes pizza.
Oh.
And number 1, that leaves me with Loki, which Cody's wrong about. But that's actually another one where like I've always kind of liked the character of Loki, but I never understood why people lose their minds about him so much. Like, yeah. I've always thought he was like fun, but like never like mind-blowing or anything. But I mean, I think that series, again, kind of made me care more about him. I liked all the like timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, jumping stuff. It's a doctor. That's a Doctor Who reference, Cody.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I loved Owen Wilson. I thought he was great in that series.
Yeah.
I thought all the performances were good. I love.
It was pretty good. Wants a jet ski.
All he wanted was a jet ski. I was so sad.
Jet ski.
I will say my only disappointment with the first season is that the last shot was not him on a jet ski.
Oh.
And that.
Yeah.
I mean, Sylvie, I thought was great too. Anyway, great show. I think that was probably one of the better things in all of the MCU. So yeah,
the ending is pretty good. I do.
It's great. The ending is great.
Yeah, the ending is great. I gotta say. Well, that's interesting too, because Loki and Hawkeye, I felt like were decent with the ending.
That's true.
WandaVision got worse after about episode 4, and Moon Knight peaked at 5.
I mean, like, spoiler alert, I feel like what worked for me with Loki is that, and I mean kind of with Hawkeye too, I felt like they didn't try to go too big with the endings. Like they didn't try to go for the like typical Marvel, CGI fight fest ending.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. I was like, Loki's ending's pretty big, but
it's big, but it's not, it does something different. Like,
I see what you're saying. Yes,
it's more grounded and character based as opposed to like, your like blue beam coming from the sky trying to destroy the earth.
Yeah. Right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Okay. Is that it? That's all I got. Anything else from anybody else?
No, I think we hit all the major points. Fun show, and I'm glad we decided to revisit it after that first episode recap or impressions.
I think
okay.
Next Disney Plus is taking us to Obi-Wan. Is that correct?
I think you're right. That's is that this month?
It's this month, I think. I don't know if it's next week, this week, 2 weeks. I don't know.
I have to say, I was not at all excited about that show, but the trailer did look pretty awesome.
I'll have to rewatch it.
I'm trying to fight the hype.
Not excited for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Not to get me excited for a prequel. So
Ewan McGregor is 12 years younger than Sir Alec Guinness was in A New Hope. So Obi-Wan's about to have a rough 12 years.
He probably just sits in a room watching episode 8. All right. Well, Justin, I think you are our host. You want to take us out?
Oh, sure. Even though I felt like I kind of delegated hosting.
I'm sorry, I kind of stole it with
I
my
took a lot of
Wikipedia
it too.
here.
So.
It's fine. It's fine.
We can just do it together, barbershop trio style.
All right, sure. So thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, this has been Friends
occasionally not disagree. You guys, I just got back from Doctor Strange. You know what happens?